Everybody's got a blank page, a story they're writing today, a wall that they're climbing. You can carry the past on your shoulders. You can start over regrets. No matter what you've gone through, Jesus, He gave it all to save you. He carried the cross on His shoulders, so you can start over.
Don't let your heart be troubled, don't be afraid. To the brokenhearted, their wishes paid. Never been born, never been torn, never sinned, never disobeyed. I know you think there's no hope, no, but that ain't true. Jesus saved. I know you feeling regret, like I brought this all on myself, like I messed it up big time, and this time I don't deserve God's help. Thinking, how can God forgive me? After knowing what I did, can He? After knowing that I hid from Him and I stayed away and backslid. Listen, Jesus came for the sick, so true. Jesus came for the weak, amen. Jesus came to give good news and to set the captives free, amen. Listen, Jesus came for the poor, amen. Jesus came with the keys, amen. Jesus came to remove the chains so the prisoners can be released.
Everybody's got a blank page, a story they're writing today, a wall that they're climbing. You can carry the past on your shoulders. You can start over regrets. No matter what you've gone through, Jesus, He gave it all to save you. He carried the cross on His shoulders, so you can start over.
See, His love is deeper than the ocean floor. Run to His arms like an open door. God the Father sent the Son so men can come and be free, ain't gotta run no more. Come to me, all who are weary, with heavy burdens I'll give you rest. Separating you from your sin, as far as the east is from the west. Thrown in the sea of forgetfulness. What sin, what offense? And when them waves come crashing in, I'll calm the winds in your defense. So whatever it is that you've done, He put that punishment on His Son. You'll never come under His condemnation, conquer sin and Satan and his accusations. So dry your eyes, lift up your head. Hallelujah, God is not dead. Plus He gave us His peace, and He took our guilt on the cross instead. Took our place and now we embrace a clean slate with the eyes of faith. We know unfailing love, unfailing love. It's not too late, start over.
A story they're writing today, a wall that they're climbing. You can carry the past on your shoulders. You can start over regrets. No matter what you've gone through, Jesus, He gave it all to save you. He carried the cross on His shoulders, so you can start over.
What up, friends and foes? It's time for episode 11 of That Dude Cast, Then and Now. The reason I've titled this one Then and Now is because this episode is going to be a comparison of the conditions that existed in 1776 when the founders declared independence from Great Britain and the conditions that we have in place right now. A lot of people, when they think about our founding fathers, they think it was a bunch of old men that rose up to do what needed to be done. A lot of people don't understand that Thomas Jefferson was only 33 years old. Robert Livingston was 29 years old. John Adams was 41. Then you had some old men that were guiding the younger generation. Benjamin Franklin was 70, and Roger Sherman was 55. But folks, you've got Andrew Jackson listed as a founding father. Dude was 9 years old. 9 years old. And you can go online and you can look up how old the founding fathers were. Andrew Jackson was 9, right? Joseph Plum Martin, 15. Aaron Burr was 20. James Monroe was 18. Alexander Hamilton was 21. Betsy Ross, the lady that made the first flag, we think of her as being an old lady. She was 24 years old. James Madison was 25. John Paul Jones was 28. Benjamin Rush was 30. Abigail Adams was 31. These were a bunch of young people that were motivated to stand up for their God-given rights and overthrow a much more powerful nation because they recognized they had right standing with God and that they were good and virtuous people, and they recognized the things that were being done to them, that they were not okay, and they were not willing to just go along to get along. They were willing to stand up. They were willing to endure a temporarily prolonged discomfort for the promise of liberty. And right now, people have been lulled into a pseudo-conscious, hypnotized state of just going along to get along. And we all sense that things aren't quite right, that we would like things to be better, but we excuse the way things are because we still have what we perceive to be first world comforts. And what a lot of people do not understand is that the enemy of human harmony, working through debased minds, has managed to find a new way of keeping the people docile with giving them the bread and circus that is needed to meet their base physiological needs and then meet their desire to be entertained with frivolous and trivial things that they just don't have the lasting relevance that more virtuous endeavors have, right? And don't get me wrong, I enjoy sporting contests. I think sports are a great way to instill lifelong virtuous lessons into young people about how if you will endure temporary discomfort, the gain that you attain is worth that temporary discomfort. The fact that you only have 1,440 minutes in a day, what are you doing to invest into the bank of future you? And the fact that if being great were easy, being great would not matter. Okay, these are things that I greatly enjoy to instill into young people so that then they can take those lessons they learn into life and they can thrive when they get older. The issue that we have is that our society has largely lost sight of the foundation of reality that God has provided us to live by. And if the people do not recognize the foundation of reality that God has provided us to live by, then the people individually and society collectively will lose the psychological stability that is necessary to maintain civil society. The dysfunction will eventually overwhelm the function, as we see playing out in our society today. We can still have a lot of the things that we enjoy, but the people have to be aware. We may have to suspend some of the things that we really enjoy so that we can establish something that is better and more stable and lasting, and then we can come back and have a lot of those things that we enjoy, the leisure activities that seem to occupy too much of people's time when we are in a very serious situation at the present. Does it have to be a full out kinetic hot war before the people recognize what is in place? Does it have to be food rationing? Does it have to be a cyber attack on the power grid and the people lose access to electricity for 3 months before the people recognize just how precarious the times are? I hope that it's not that. I hope it doesn't take that. But if that's what it's got to be, that's what it's got to be. Ultimately, God wants people to recognize the foundation of reality that has been provided to us. God wants us to pursue right standing with the standard that God has provided us. And God wants us to live in harmony with one another, but we cannot live in harmony with one another when so many people are so far off base. You see, there's a balance of power that exists in every society. And when the majority of the people are ideologically compromised, those people will carry out the will of tyrants. But if you have good people who are the dominant majority in a society, then there's no one who is willing to carry out the evil agenda of tyrants. I hope that makes sense to you. And so maybe you're not really fully aware. Maybe you've been made numb like so many other people. But today on that Dude Cast, we are going to go line by line through the Declaration of Independence and highlight the things that caused those people all the way back then to stand up and pursue their God-given right and the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. Okay, so here's where we're at. I got the Declaration of Independence up there now, but we can't really read that, right? And there's some words in there that was even big for me, right? Now, I am just a refined hillbilly, and I'm convinced that most people are going to be able to recognize the similarities between then and now. If I can figure this out, the ignorance of God manifested through the mind of a refined hillbilly can figure this out and recognize, man, that ain't right. That ain't right. What they're doing to us now is actually worse than what Great Britain and King George III was doing to those people all the way back then. So here we are. And this here is the Declaration of Independence, and I've highlighted certain words just to give you a little succinct definition of words that might be harder for some people to just know off the top of their head. There were some words like consanguinity. I had no idea. That blew my mind. I had a hard time saying it. I probably had to say it 10 times before I could say it right. Consanguinity. And I still might be saying it wrong, but it looks like it flows phonetically, so I'm going to go with it, right? So anyhow, I've got my notes here, and I've got the Declaration of Independence. I got a little handy dandy citizen rule book copy right here, and I went through and I numbered it. I don't know if you can see it. The light is too bright. Anyway, it just looks like it's a white page, but it's there, I promise you, right? And then over here in my notes, I have just the and this is not an exhaustive list, folks. These are just the things that came to my head as a man who has paid attention to current events pretty well for the last, let's say 15, 16 years. And so here we go. In Congress, July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. All right. So what they're saying there is, hey, we can't just say we're done with you. We got to tell you why we're done with you. So, and basically what they're saying is, when a government is destroying the people's ability to live free and pursue happiness, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish, and institute a new government based on the fundamental principles that seem most likely to affect safety and happiness, right? And I kind of jumped the gun a little bit there, but I want you to think about that. What are the fundamental principles most likely to affect safety and happiness? Folks, I'm going to go ahead and answer that question for you. It is the foundation of reality that God has provided us to live by. And if you don't know what that is, you can go back and watch episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll lay that out for you, and then jump to episode 8, where I really dive into the invisible foundation of reality. So it says here, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Joe Biden says, come on, you know the thing, right? But the founding fathers said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, which is good sense, indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such a government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, which is taking control of without having the right to do so, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid, straightforward world. And so now I'm going to just lay out right here from my notes all the ways that this has manifested into our present reality. Okay, folks, our education system is purposely inept. I lay that out in episode 4 within the first 45 minutes. Okay. Our military is largely overseas. Our annual military expenditures are out of control. The United States taxpayer covers 1/5 the budget for the United Nations. The southern border is wide open. The food we eat is causing people to be unhealthy. If you think that's just a crazy conspiracy theory, just be mindful when you go to Walmart or really anywhere for that matter at how unhealthy people look. In all of human history, no population has been so unhealthy and obese as the United States of America. It is not that way by accident. Folks, when we have high-level athletes, Olympians that look the way they do, and we have people in the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, when you've got people that can really be super healthy at that level, we know the knowledge is there. We understand that people would be that way if they were healthy, and everybody that's unhealthy, they don't really like it. They just feel trapped in their current condition. But if this government, if this system, this oligarchical democratic posing system actually cared about the best interest of the people, people would be healthier. And I've had people say, well, I'm just fat because I like to eat. Like that is insanity, that you are excusing the way that things are and you're chalking it up to that you just like to do things that you know aren't good for you, right? That is illogical to attribute a person's poor choices solely to the fact that they just like to eat. If people could still eat and make healthy choices and be healthy and live an extra 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, they would make that choice. Okay. People have just kind of wilted. People have accepted just being cucked by the system. That's with a CUCKED. I didn't say the F word. Okay. They've been kind of sold out by the system and they just like getting screwed over by it. That's basically what I mean right there. And they just want to attribute it to, oh, it's just a first world problem. No, it's not, folks. It's a problem. And it shouldn't be this way, but we allow it to be this way. And one of the reasons why it matters so much to me is because we are all in this together. And let me give you an example. I used to go to Dollar General and get healthy snacks. And then I started noticing that the snacks were on the discount shelf. And I liked that for a little bit, but then it hit me. They're on the discount shelf because nobody else is buying them. And now that snack profile that I like, those healthy snacks that were at Dollar General, they're not there anymore. And so I can't go buy those healthy snacks at a reasonable price. I would have to order them online and it would cost a lot more and I'd have to pay shipping and so on and so forth. And so as long as people stay trapped in ignorance, that weighs down the rest of society. However, if people actually band together and they start taking the steps to do what needs to be done, we can all live happy and healthy and harmonious lives. but that takes awareness. And until there's awareness, there's no unity. And until there's unity, there's no leverage to move our political figures to make decisions that actually work in the best interest of the people, right? And so I continue on here. They also say here that people will put up with a lot, but at a certain point, folks got to realize when enough is enough. At a certain point, the people must recognize when a government has become hostile and intent on establishing a tyranny. And at that point, the people must throw off such a government and set up a new way to secure the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, our government is currently spying on the people at a level that would make people's skin crawl if they actually understood the depths of it. I'm convinced at this point they have digital file folders at a server farm on every one of us, and they're tracking when we come into certain circles of people, who we contact on a regular basis. They limit communications even through cell phone providers. I have personally caught this happening multiple times when I go to send messages to certain people, they don't get through. Then I call such person, they have no record of me sending them a text message. Okay. The taxes that are being used against the people's best interest. Look at what happened with the 2020 election, folks. If you think Joe Biden legitimately received 81 million real votes, you're full. Go and talk around. Why do you think that they manipulated people into thinking that talking about politics and religion and money was taboo? So that when you talked about it with people at work, you're whispering about it because you don't want to get turned into human resources, because maybe 20% of the people that you work around would be offended by the things that you say, right? It's all a part of social engineering and manipulation. And until the people are able to get back control of their society, then the top tier, that small dominant minority at the top that's pulling the strings, that's manipulating our society, they're going to continue to dominate the people. Folks, the average person doesn't have access to the highest levels of government. Okay, the people who have access to the highest levels of government are the people who own the majority shares of the largest companies, the industry leaders. Okay, the highest people, the executives in the most powerful corporations and the most powerful banking institutions. Okay, the people that dominate government, media, banking, the food industry, education. They obviously don't have the best interest of the people in mind, or they would be making different choices. And there's always somebody else lined up to fill in if they have a come to Jesus, if they have a conscious awakening of the fact that they're just being used as a tool of tyrants. But see, they like that paycheck. They're willing to do what they need to do to get that paycheck. They serve the hand that feeds them. They just want to appease the people. They want to keep the people from getting too riled up. Because if the people actually stand up and do what needs to be done, the people will stop complying with the demands of the system, and they will begin to meet the basic needs of the people in their community. You want to rally people together. You want to get people out and connected with their community. Get everybody on the same page of, all right, we're going to start out. We're going to make sure everybody in this community's got water and shelter and food, and we'll build up from there, right? And that would bring everybody together, and it would be a much more harmonious life than being dependent on a system that just keeps people doggy paddling all the time. They got everybody just doggy paddling, trying to stay caught up, and then people just want to escape it all and engage in forms of entertainment that really aren't beneficial in the long term. Okay, and it's fine, I guess, to just relax every once in a while, right? I guess people shouldn't have to have it turned on all the time, but there's too many people that don't turn it on any of the time, right? And so, anyway, more evidence of the things that the system is doing to us. The fact that enough people have come through the southern border since Joe Biden took office in 2021 that it would be like the 10th largest state in the United States, right at 11 million people. Right, how the federal government and the military was so heavy-handed in forcing people to get the COVID shot. Right, and we shouldn't just overthrow a government for light and transient causes, just like the Declaration of Independence says. It says people will put up with a lot. But at a certain point, folks got to stand up and say enough is enough. And hey, Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution is talking about the punishment of treason and how there's 2 or more witnesses before you can actually bring charges. And that's Congress's job. But you saw how many people stood up for against what was going on with the election in 2020. How many congressmen did the people have stand up and say, no, this ain't right? I think it was under 130. That's not counting Senate. That's just the House. But it was under 130 were willing to stand up and say this isn't right. And that shows you just how lopsided it is. Folks, we have 435 congressional districts in the United States, and that so few were willing to stand up. That tells you that it's really not in a good spot. But we've all witnessed what's happened. I mean, you want evidence of treason against the United States? Because what's it say in Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution? Let me just go ahead and turn over there real quick. It says treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or adhering to the enemies, giving them aid and comfort. It says no person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act. Folks, I've laid out in episode 1 and in other episodes that there's a concerted effort to upend the sovereignty of the United States. That's the states and the whole, to merge us into a one world government. That is so. When you go back and you look at the time in office and the voting records and the financial gains of people who were supposed to be looking after the best interest of the United States and securing our national sovereignty and the people's right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, you can clearly see who betrayed their oath of office that they swore to uphold and protect. And so at this point, we can see clearly that this government system is being directed by a group of oligarchs who use ideologically compromised people to force their will. Okay, so what we have in place now, obviously, we don't have a king that is giving these dictates. It's groups of unelected officials working together with other people. This is what the United Nations is, folks, if you haven't picked that up yet. If you don't recognize that a world government is literally just sitting and waiting and manipulating and aiming to work out all the final details so that they can collapse the economies of the world and create social chaos so that the people will fight it out amongst themselves for however long that the system and the world government thinks that the people need to fight out amongst themselves and try to that however long that they think that the people will fight before they give up, basically. Right. That's what they want. They want people to just be so tired of fighting that they just roll over and take what the world system is going to force on them. Doesn't have to be that way. But if we continue to just go along to get along, that is exactly what they plan to do. And they're using our own people against us. They're using ideologically compromised people to carry out their agenda. And the only way that you can really bring people back is you have to put the truth on them. And I'm not saying you have to go in and put a gun in people's face and say, hey, here's the truth, because that's not going to work. You have to appeal the truth. You have to make it where it matters to people. You have to bring them to a point where They recognize how short their time really is, how long eternity is, and all of the evidence that points to the reality of God and the supremacy of Jesus Christ. That's what my mission is. That's what I've laid it out there, and people are just afraid to go read it. People are so scared to death of conscious awareness and the responsibilities that follow that they just avoid it. But if anybody ever wanted to know how things came to be, what is the evidence for the way things are, go over to truestreality.com. There's an ebook over there for you. And then I launched this podcast to come as close to spoon feeding people the truth as possible. And still, so many people just avoid it. But that's the thing. Believers and people who actually care about maintaining traditional America and patriotic America, that really like freedom, not so much that they abuse it, but enough that they're willing to fight for it. That's what you got to do. You've got to work with other people. You've got to put up billboards that just drop truth bombs on people. The truth is true. Send them to a website where there's information. You can go and you can use the book that I've written. Okay. You can take excerpts from it, put them on billboards. I don't care. Ultimately, until the people recognize the foundation of reality and pursue right standing with God's standard, nothing else really matters. Right. And granted, we still got to live our lives, right? We can't just go bury ourselves in a bunker. And so there's much more that I would like to be able to do, but you can only do so much when you have limited resources. So our most valuable resource is our time. So I'm always working to put my time into plans for the future. So right now, I spend a lot of time working on things with young people and helping them to be the best that they can be and imparting wisdom into them and looking out for people that have kind of been neglected. Okay. That's where my heart is building relationships with people and really trying to get good, strong groups of 12 who come to agreement and are willing to go forward. Right. But so many people are so busy. They're so caught up with life. And I get it. Folks have got bills to pay. But that's, like I said, people are just constantly doggy paddling, trying to stay caught up. All the while, the people who are manipulating our society, the people that are using our avenues of entertainment to distort our perceptions of reality, they're game planning. How can we dominate these people? How can we move the herd without creating a stampede? They're scared to death of a stampede, not a chaotic stampede, but really more of a standing up and throwing off the chains and saying, we recognize what you've done. Now we're going to come together and actually do something better. But until the people are aware, that's not going to happen. So here we go. We're going to hear these facts, these straightforward facts that our founders gave us when they declared independence from King George. It says he has refused his assent to laws the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. So basically, the king wouldn't do things that are there for the public good, that should be done for the public good. I'm just going to rattle these off, right? So keep in mind, the king has been replaced by an oligarchical democracy. And it's here, the system, I'm just going to call that oligarchical democracy, the system. The system refused to allow laws that are the best for the people, and they enact laws that are harmful. Here's some examples. The time change thing. It is absolutely ignorant that we are forced to change the clocks twice a year. In the state of Missouri, the state house passed just leaving it the way that it is in the summertime. Marco Rubio in the Senate, he got a bill passed that was just going to leave the clocks the way that they are in the summertime. Nancy Pelosi would never even bring it up, right? And it's a federal mandate that all the states have to be on the same page there, because that could get kind of messy if you had one state that was just changing it because that's what the system tells them to do, and you had another system was like, no, we ain't gonna do this. This is ridiculous, right? Doesn't make sense. And there's all kinds of statistics that show that heart attacks go up, car wrecks go up, suicide goes up, all right there around that time. Like, how stupid is it that in the cold months, they take that extra hour of daylight people would have when they get off of the hamster wheel and they come home, right? And those people, it's dark when they get home. They don't have energy to go out and do a whole lot. And then people determine in January, all right, I got that New Year's resolution. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do it right. And right when they hit their groove, come about the end of March, boom, the system has everybody change clocks again. They still an hour asleep from you. Folks, it doesn't make sense for a reason, right? And it's ridiculous that we, the people, we can't even seem to come to a greater degree of awareness and unity as is necessary to correct something as simple as this stupid clock change twice a year, right? Then look, income tax, property tax, forced tax to support the public schools, right? The government works on behalf of the corporations, but not the people, right? And what I'm talking about there with the public schools, you don't get to determine where your education tax dollars go. The system takes your education dollars, your tax dollars for education, they give them to a public school system that is a humanist indoctrination center. You want to know why test scores are so low? Why the public school system is messier than white shoes in a mud run? It is because those young people do not understand where the foundation of reality is. Now, some of them will get by because their home is in proximity to the foundation of reality. Okay. You don't even have to be a Christian to be in proximity to the foundation of reality. But eventually, the fewer people that are at the foundation of reality or near it, the majority is going to influence a lot of people to come away from that because it becomes less and less socially acceptable. And we could talk about that more another time. But these young people are figuratively just kind of floating in time and space, and they don't really understand where they're at in it all. They don't have grounding. They don't have that concrete, fundamental, foundational structure upholding them and giving them psychological stability. So it's hard for them to set their phone aside or to set their video game aside and do something that's difficult that they believe doesn't really have any relevance in life. You want young people to engage in the public school system, then you need to teach them the foundation of reality. You need to teach them why the date is literally set on the birth of Jesus Christ, only time in human history. But no, the public school system is watering down history. It's breaking history up in a way that the kids really can't put it all together. Doesn't make sense to them, and it's begin teaching the CE BCE instead of BC AD. But the ridiculous thing about that is that the dividing point is still the same. It's still right there, that birth of Jesus. And I've showed you before the timetables of history. We're talking a little base smidgen of history was all that got documented in 3,500 years of history. And then in the last, say, like 22 million hours, the accumulation of history since Jesus Christ has just exploded. And the date is literally set on the birth of Jesus. Not to mention that we're held together at a molecular level by laminin that is literally shaped like the cross. We are literally held together by the cross, but people want to write that off as if it's just coincidental. It's ridiculous. You want young people to start doing better, tell them the truth. Tell them the truth. Tell them that God has given us a standard of behavior that we should live by. Start reading them about that standard, teaching it to them, lay it out for them. I've laid it out for you in episode 4, and I've laid it out for you in chapter 4 of the book that I've written over at truestreality.com. It's called The Standards Merit. Real easy peasy. Everybody could probably go over there and say, yep, that makes a whole lot of sense, right? But until then, until people recognize the foundation of reality and are willing to pursue right standing with God's standard, this descent is going to continue, America. Mark my words, remember it. So, going forward, says that, oh no, I got more about how he's refused to pass the most wholesome laws, and he passes laws that are not good for the people. So the insurance companies only cover system establishment medicine, right? You want to go to a natural medicine doctor? That ain't going to be covered by your insurance, homie, right? And then, it's illegal to sell raw milk, right? You think I'm playing with you? Go look up the documentary called Farmageddon, right? Look at how the IRS and the Department of Justice targets their political opposition. Dinesh D'Souza, Donald Trump, Michael Flynn, Alex Jones, Owen Schroyer, right? They use lawfare against the people, which you may not even be guilty of the crime that they've charged you with, right? Which really, if you want to get technical, there's so many laws, everybody's guilty. It's until the system recognize that you're a threat to the things they're trying to do, then they will say, up, we found something, you're guilty of it. We're going to try and pin you against the wall. And then you may not even be guilty, but they're going to bankrupt you in the process. And if you can't happen to afford to defend yourself, say you're just a common Joe that stood up against the system, they're going to pin you to the wall. They are going to take you for everything that you got. That's not how things work in a free society. And I can give you an example of that. A few years ago, there was a snafu on the Conservation Department app, and I tried to tag this deer that I shot and found out that now all of a sudden I'm not eligible to be able to use an extra doe tag in my county. Now, if I would have been an unethical person, I'd have just chopped that sucker up and put it right in my freezer, right? I could have tagged it and said I killed it in another county. I didn't feel right about that. So I told my wife, I said, hey, baby, you just go ahead and buy another tag and just check that deer in. Conservation agent shows up at my house the next morning, writes me a ticket for improperly tagging a deer. I take it to court. I challenge it. I get it where I want to present my case before the judge. I present my case before the judge. The judge can obviously tell that I'm contrite and telling the truth, right? He throws out the charges from the Conservation Department. I'm like, all right, yeah, cool. I ended up paying more money in court costs than I paid if I would have just paid the daggum ticket, right? It shouldn't be that way. It wouldn't be that way if we were in a free country. Okay. But then you look at how the FBI colluded with social media companies to cover up the Hunter Biden laptop story, right? You look back at the Fast and the Furious scandal where the Obama administration lost a bunch of weapons down in Mexico, right? Weapons that turned out being used against the American military in the Middle East a few years later, right? You look at the Iran-Contra conflict and the things that were going on down in Nicaragua, how our own CIA was trading Nicaraguan rebels weapons and munitions and then flying the drugs from Nicaragua into major U.S. cities. Our own government created the crack epidemic in LA in the 80s. Folks, this is documented, verified fact. If you don't believe me, go look up the movie Kill the Messenger about Gary Webb, an American hero, and go look up American Made about a man named Barry Seal, right? And then while we're talking about Barry Seal, who was flying, I believe he was flying drugs into Mena, Arkansas, right? And then, man, what was that? There was a special on Fox about the Clintons. Man, there's so much dirty, nasty stuff going on around them. Like, hey, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? But then look about what Hillary Clinton's emails, right? How they were smashing devices with hammers, and they were using a software program called BleachBit that just went in and wiped it all out. Folks, it's a clear legal double standard. They had a bunch of useful idiots engaging in anarchy in the summer of 2020 with the BLM and Antifa protest, but then they're using tyrannical tactics against traditional Americans. And I got it in here in my notes later about a man named Mark Houck, who's the head of a pro-life union of Greater Philadelphia, and he was at an abortion rally, an anti-abortion rally, with his teenage son, and this guy that was a patient escort, he's cussing and yelling and acting real aggressively toward Mark's 13-year-old son. So Mark pushes the dude down to the ground, and that guy tried to file charges, and the state, they threw out the charges. They said, man, we don't have enough evidence here to go forward with assault charges or anything like that. We're going to just throw the case out. The DOJ, federal government, Department of Justice, picks up the case, and they're in contact with him. They're letting him know, hey, we've picked this case up. We may charge you. He's like, okay, if that's the case, just let me know. I'll turn myself in. Nah. They ain't going to let him turn himself in. They show up at his house at 7 o'clock in the morning, unannounced, with like 20, 30 FBI agents heavily armed, and they arrest that man. and he had to pay to defend himself and so on and so forth. That's just one example of many. And folks, keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just the things that stuck out to me literally as I went through the Declaration of Independence line by line. It says that King George has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his agreement should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. Folks, state governors are afraid to exercise their state autonomy and do what's best for the people. Look at down in Texas. It took all this time for Greg Abbott to say, we're going to go ahead and put up a wall. And then the Biden administration has somebody, I don't know exactly who it was, but has somebody down there with the authority to tear that wall down with a bulldozer, right? So the Abbott government, the state of Texas, okay, the Abbott administration, he's the governor of the state of Texas, he builds a wall, and then the Biden administration comes in and usurps their state power and destroys that barbed wire wall that was stemming the flow or stopping the flow of illegal immigrants invading the country. Okay, if governors would just let their cojones hang and just do what needs to be done and then link up with each other, the people will get behind you. Right? We need to just do what needs to be done. And I'm talking secure the borders. Go ahead and just build coal power plants, drill for oil, build pipelines, allow the citizens to do what needs to be done. Just keep the taxes in state, right? Allow the citizens to determine which educational consortium their tax dollars are going to go to, right? But the system that's in place, it just drags its feet on everything, right? And the cities, they're dominating the political arena, right? Why are blue states blue? Why are blue cities blue? Could it be that there's something in the water, right? Could there be something that's causing those people to have such warped mindsets? That I think there's something there. I think there's something to it. Might want to go check what the cities are putting in the water. And say, hey, our community right here in the heart of the country. I asked the dude, he was a water treatment specialist. I said, hey man, they put fluoride in the water here in Rolla. He said, yeah. I said, that's not good for people, right? He said, I've heard that. I said, you just do it anyway, huh? He said, man, I just do what I got to do my job. And it wasn't 6 months later, I see this man getting a plaque from the Center for Disease Control for water treatment. And I was like, daggum, for $50,000 and a little big $20 plaque, a man will poison his own community's water supply. Ain't that something? But I'm out here on a well, and hey, you know what? The system might find ways to taint the well water too, but I sure have a whole lot more vigor and mental clarity than most folks, right? Things aren't the way they are by accident. And when you're consciously aware, you make better choices when you're just a blissed in la la land, right? So anyway, the whole country is impacted by these cities that dominate the political arena in each of their states. And then you look at California, look at all those electoral votes. Look at all those electoral votes in New York and Florida and Texas. And then you see all these people that are leaving out of California and they're moving to Austin, Texas, because the system wants to flip those electoral votes toward the Democratic Communist Party. And then let's see, where are we at here? Okay, so the next one says, he has called together, this is King George, legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the keeping place of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. King George has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time after such disillusions, that's to shutting down, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers incapable of annihilation have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions, violent political upheaval from within. So let's see where we're at here on the notes. So you think about that Washington, D.C. is kind of isolated from the rest of the country, but most of the government headquarters are there. You think about all the lobbying firms that are in Washington, D.C., they just stay sat up there. You got to at least make it a little bit harder on the lobbyist folks. I mean, you shouldn't have everything right there in D.C. I mean, just from a military, a strategic standpoint, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a whole lot of power consolidated in one spot. Because then, if somebody was to drop a nuke on Washington D.C., man, you've like really wrecked the head of the government, right? It really seems like it would make more sense if you spread that out. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a refined hillbilly, right? And then you think about how the system just delays and drags its feet on so many things, how it takes the bureaucracy so long to move. You got to get all these approvals, you got to get all those approvals. It's like, man, at what point do we know enough that we can just do what needs to be done? I think we're at that point. I think we know enough that we can just make moves and get stuff done. I mean, it's happened before. I mean, how long did it take to build? I went out a few months ago. I went out and I got to see the Hoover Dam. I think it took like just a year. How long did it take to build the Hoover Dam? Oh, my bad. 5 years. So 5 years. 5 years they build this massive dam. I mean, mother loving massive, that supplies all this power to Southern California and Nevada and Arizona, right? If you mobilize the people and you give them real reason to believe, they're going to do good things. And see, this power structure that exists, this it poses as a democracy, but really it's an oligarchy. Our society is what their forefathers created, and then they want to look at it in disdain, like they hate what the people have become, and they want to look at the people as if the people are less than. But really, the people that are at the highest levels of all this, they were afraid of having a populace of aware and empowered and vigorous people, because they knew they couldn't compete with that. They couldn't have the things that they wanted. They couldn't enforce their will on the people if the people were actually exalted and lifted up. They didn't want that. No. They wanted to suppress information and oppress the people so that they could dominate them as they wanted to. And so what they do now is they just manipulate people to sin. They understand this. They understand if they can get people to violate God's standard, that people do not have the psychological stability that is necessary to consistently make good decisions. And when you consistently make poor decisions, you're pretty easy to dominate, right? That is what we have in place today. Let's see what else I got on my notes here. Oh, this one applies to 4, 5, and 6. It says, I said, the system ensured that Mike Pence did not send the 2020 election votes back to the state houses of the states in question. So that right there, that is where this system kept the people from actually having their will manifested, right? This system did not even allow the state houses to determine the way that the electoral votes, even though there was so much evidence of widespread corruption and fraud. And so Mike Pence didn't send it back to the states to let them vote. And he very well could have. He said that he couldn't have constitutionally at that point in time. He could have. And then after they did what he did, I don't know if anybody saw it or not, but after Mike Pence sold out the American people and stabbed Trump in the back figuratively, he came up off the stage and he was elbow bumping with Nancy Pelosi. Somebody handed him probably a few pieces of silver or something in his hand too. Saw that. And hey, Kendall's grandpa, he ain't what he presents himself to be. Okay. It just makes me sick when I hear him talk about Jesus and God and the word. And man, it's just so unauthentic. He's so daggone plastic. If somebody came out and said dude was a robot, I mean, people have said stuff like that. I'm not saying that I believe it, but if somebody proved it, they had a verified video evidence that Mike Pence was a robot, I would say, man, I kind of had a hinkling maybe that was the thing. I ain't saying Mike Pence is a robot. I'm just, you hear what I'm saying, right? So anyway, after he did what he did and basically solidifying the fraudulent results of the 2020 election. Then they went through and they voted to make it where the vice president can't do what he could have done. So now that's that's the standard that they've set. You'd have to go back and change that, but it's awfully hard to do that when the vast majority of the representatives are controlled by the hands that feed them. You see what I'm saying? That's why it's so important that we just bring everything back local. The states say, you know what, feds, you don't have no jurisdiction here. We're going to do our own thing. And I'm not talking about secession and civil war and all that. I'm talking about state governors with the man and lady cojones that's necessary to do what needs to be done, right? So then the next part, oh, this is a continuation on number 4, talking about interfering in the elections and then how the system protects its people. Look at Dominion voting systems and how the media were standing up for the integrity of the election, and how it went after the people that were questioning the integrity of the system. You look at what happened out in Arizona with Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake. Well, nobody wanted to know Katie Hobbs to be the governor of Arizona. People wanted Carrie Lake. And you look at all of the inconsistencies and the things that were going on out there. And I'm still convinced that more people wanted Blake Masters for the senator out there over Mark Kelly. I think that's who he ran against. But Blake Masters is a very appealing Senate candidate for traditionally minded patriotic Americans. How Carrie Lake and Blake Masters didn't win out there is it. The only way you can explain it is fraud, right? And so think about how the system ties up the people's time with and the people's resources with red tape and compliance and like I mentioned earlier, using lawfare. And then and all of those resources that are ate up by the system occupying people's time, it ends up leading the people to neglect more pressing priorities. You know, another reason why our society is so unhealthy and just so beat down and so tired, it's just because this bureaucracy, it weighs on people and it drags people down, and the system just continues to take advantage of vulnerable, ignorant people who trust it. I mean, look at how many things that could be correctable that our government just it fails to correct, right? The border situation, all the fentanyl, all the meth, all the unhealthy food, the mRNA COVID injections that sellouts like Travis Kelce are manipulating the people into thinking are okay. Oh, Travis Kelce said he got his COVID shot and his flu shot all in one. I need to go get one of them 2-for-1 specials myself. People really are that naive. People really do think there's no way this government would allow huge corporations to sell me things that weren't good for me. It's sad that people lack the critical thinking skills to actually analyze the society that we live in and recognize that things aren't this way by accident. Okay. If the system actually cared, people's lives would look so much different. I continue. It says King George has endeavored, which is he's tried hard to prevent the population of these states for that purpose, obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. And so I got that. And let's see where are we at here. All right. So look at the immigration policies that we have in place today. Look at how the people on January 6th were provoked. The first people that breached the Capitol, they did so 15 minutes before Trump's speech even ended. Traditional Americans, patriotic people, they were listening to Donald Trump speak. Who was it that was over there at the Capitol already breaching those barriers and entering into the Capitol building? And here, just in the last few days, they've released all. The new Speaker of the House did what McCarthy just couldn't seem to do. Okay, but that's back to the bureaucracy dragging its feet. Mike Johnson gets them released, and you have all this film of people peacefully walking through the Capitol building, and the police officers just kind of ushering them on and through. Okay. Look at how much damage happened inside. They say it was an insurrection, first unarmed insurrection, probably in world history, right? And they didn't mess up a bunch of stuff. Now, windows were broken. There were things that were destroyed, but those were the provocateurs. There are very few people that were charged on that day that actually tore stuff up. But you look at how so many people have come through the southern border. Okay. What are those people being used for? What is their purpose? And a lot of people are like, oh, just send them back to where they came from. Folks, I don't think that's going to work. Those people, a lot of them that came here, they think that America is the great Satan. They think that we are horrible. One of the reasons why they came here is because, well, the United States covers 1/5 of the United Nations budget. And in a lot of ways, we've funded the dysfunction in those people's countries. And a lot of them are convinced that it was the United States that did that to them. And they've lost loved ones in this. So I want you to think about how you would feel if somebody came and destroyed your country, and then you were given incentives to migrate to the country that you believe caused you a lot of pain and suffering. How do you think that would work out? Something to think about. Something to think about. If we go at these people hostilely, they're going to make sure that it's nasty. Okay, I believe that they've been brought here in large part to replace and destroy the American people, and they feel justified in it because they think that we are the ones. They have probably a really hard time separating the average American person from our government, right? But then, I mean, has the system not obstructed justice? And that begs the question, what is just? And who sets the terms? Who determines the meaning of justice? I mean, you look at the comparison between the January 6th people. Look, they had congressional hearings about it, and I mean, they drug it out. They put it in primetime TV. And what about the BLM and Antifa riots? What about who bears responsibility for that? I mean, I believe Kamala Harris had a fund established to bail BLM protesters out of prison or out of jail. Okay, when they're burning down entire city blocks and destroying people's homes and businesses, right? But then, you talk about obstructing justice, and I'm just going to bring these up. I mean, look at all the insider trading. Look at the Hunter Biden laptop story. Look at all these emails about Joe Biden. I mean, you got, what is it, Tony Bobolinsky? He's giving people hard evidence of corruption with the Bidens. Where's the congressional hearing? Look at all the odd deaths that are surrounding the Clintons. Okay, the Jeffrey Epstein, right? The system goes after critics and uses its powers to provoke them with useful idiots. So you got all these BLM and Antifa protests during the summer of 2020 when people were supposed to be locked down because of COVID. And then you've got this election that was just, it was a mess, folks. Anybody that has any integrity at all can look at it and say, man, that wasn't right. The way that went down, it reeks to high hell of corruption and fraud. And then you start putting the pieces in place and you recognize that the enemy of harmony working through debased minds They don't have a standard that says don't steal. They don't have a standard that says don't murder. They have a standard that says do what thou wilt, right? And that's what they do. They'll steal, they'll lie, they'll kill, they'll do whatever they got to do to get what they want, right? And so we have to stop being so naive, Christians. We have to stop being so naive as to believe that everybody plays the game that we set out to play. And I'm not saying that we need to step over that line and become what our enemy is, but we can't sit back here and be so ignorant as to think that our enemy isn't playing dirty. Okay. We have to recognize our enemy for what it is. We got to stop compromising with our enemy, right? Because when you're right and you compromise with somebody that's wrong, you move toward being wrong, right? We have to stand firm at the foundation of reality and say, you are built, your life and your social construct is a house of cards built on sand. I'm standing on this rock. But as it is now, too many Christians that are just floating around in bliss tardia, and that's not how we sustain civil society, folks. You look at how so many judges are going to be ideologically compromised too. They've lost sight of what it really means to be a judge, and in the sense that you're judging what is just and what is right or wrong according to God's standard. They're just caught up with making sure that they follow legal precedent and judicial procedures. They're worried about something coming back on them. They're worried about doing something that gets them to where they're not in that good old boy judges club, instead of pursuing right standing with the Almighty. And that's pretty much most people in our society that care more about what the world thinks than caring about what God has provisioned and what God thinks. And when you know that you're in right standing with God, the world just doesn't matter as much. It's always going to matter a little bit because we're human, but you find real strength to stand, even if you're standing alone, when you know that you're doing what God wants you to do. When you're standing on the foundation of reality and you know you're in right standing with the Almighty because you're obeying the Almighty's standard, that's one of the most empowering places a person can be. But look at all the people that have been prosecuted and persecuted by this government system. You look at what they did to Alex Jones. They ruled him guilty by default and said that he owed $1.3 billion to the Sandy Hook families because his opinion wasn't popular. Look at what they did to what they've done with Trump and how they raided his residence at Mar-a-Lago. They're just trying to make an example out of him. Look at what they did to Owen Schroyer. They said he violated his terms of probation because he interrupted a congressional hearing. He called Jerry Nadler a liar. Okay. And that got him probation and got arrested for that. He was on probation. They revoked his probation after he was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, but he didn't go on the Capitol grounds. They revoked Owen Schroyer's probation because of the words he said, and the court said that because Owen Schroyer said things like the 2020 election was fraudulent, that meant that he wasn't really sorry for the things that he had done, and they've locked him up in jail for 30 to 60 days in a federal facility. Look at what they did to Roger Stone. Look at this Dominion lawsuit against Fox. How convenient is it that Dominion files a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against Fox News because Fox actually reported, and a big part of this was Tucker Carlson reported, that the Dominion voting machines were compromised, and then they settled that out of court because Dominion did not want, and really it's not just Dominion nor Fox wanted the process of discovery to manifest, because then it was going to reveal just how corrupt that voting company is. Okay. And then you look at what the system did with Joe Biggs. They sentenced him to 20 years in prison. He didn't tear anything up on January 6th. He shook a fence and he went on the Capitol grounds. Look at what they did to Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys, who was not even in Washington, D.C. on January 6th 25 years in prison. Look what they've done to Dinesh D'Souza. He came out with that. He came out with some damning documentaries about Hillary and Obama, and they sentenced him to like a year and a half in federal prison for improper campaign donations. Everybody's guilty. It's just when you catch the ire of the system that they find a way to try to pin you to the wall. Let's see where we at here. Oh, went too far. Yeah, and then, talking more about the judicial system, just look up how many prosecuting attorneys have been backed by people like George Soros, right? And then, you've got an education system that indoctrinates people to such a degree, and then the system ensures that the people who are stepping into these different roles have those qualifications, and they're willing to serve the system at the highest levels. Look at how many people at high level government positions have went to Ivy League schools, right? That's just a feeder into those government institutions and into corporate America at the highest levels. That's where those connections are made. Okay. And that's how they keep this system going, right? And then everybody that is not at that level just doggy paddling, just trying to keep up and maybe have a little bit of fun from time to time. But these people, they're constantly thinking about how they can enforce their will and dominate the people, right? And then if the system wants to replace a particular judge, then I mean, look at what they were doing with Judge Kavanaugh, and how there were people that were showing up at his house protesting about the reversal of Roe versus Wade, right? Can you imagine how terrifying that would be as a Supreme Court judge, and you've got a mob of people shows up to your house, right? And then if you're not willing to play the game the way the system wants you to play the game, well, they're just going to put somebody in to challenge you, and then they're going to give them all kinds of funding for advertisements, and they're going to make sure that their candidate has name recognition, and you're just out of a spot. And then this part here about how King George has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. Dude, the government's huge. It is absolutely huge. The federal government is the single largest employer in the United States. What do you think the ATF, the FBI, the IRS, the DHS, the CIA, the NSA, the EPA, look at all of these three-letter agencies. Says that I looked this up online. It said there's 2.8 million federal employees. There's 3.7 million college employees. I guess that would be support staff, professors included. Then you got 3.2 million teachers, 1.3 million military, 800,000 police, 22 million healthcare workers. And a lot of that, it's all going to still be tied to federal funding. And so when they talk about government shutdown and people start getting freaked out because you're not going to get your paycheck if the government shuts down, well, the banks are still going to come to collect on that note, right? And there's no safeguard against that. So you're not getting your paycheck from the government. Oh, you won't do what needs to be done. Oh, we've got some members of Congress that are wanting to stand up and say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. They don't want to send billions of dollars to Ukraine. Oh, you've had to come to Jesus. You don't want to play the system's game anymore. Okay, we'll shut it down. We'll make people's lives absolutely miserable. And that's really kind of where they've got us, people. They've got us in a position where they could create economic chaos if the people don't do what the system wants them to do. But folks, if we don't stand up and reject what the system is doing to us, it's a slow death. Okay, it's a slow death. We are slowly and steadily being milked dry. That's what do you think this the inflation and the rise in prices and all the taxes and all that is? It's all a part of a process to extract the remaining wealth out of the nation so that the people don't have the ability to fight back. It's complex, but it's simple. Yeah. So, what do you think Chuck Schumer meant when he said the intelligence agencies have 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you? Man, they have basically unlimited resources. And now look what they're doing to the people that have stood up for this country, that have stood up for the people that have stuck their neck out. Those are some of those people that I was just reading you about there, the Donald Trumps and the Alex Joneses and Dinesh D'Souza's. And you see what the system has done to those people. And the reason why it's able to do that is because there's not more people that are willing to step up and do what needs to be done. Think about this. Think about if 25 governors, think if all the red state governors came together and said, you know what, Biden administration, federal government, you've invalidated yourself. We're not gonna work with you anymore. We are going to look out for uh, the America First agenda, and we are a part of the America First coalition. And then if you've got people that are running for president that say, you know what, we're gonna do this Team America thing. We're actually going to put together a full cabinet. We're gonna have people with just drop off egos, and we're gonna go ahead and already just put this plan in place to save America. Man alive, the people would eat it up. The people would eat it up, and they would buy in if somebody would just come together as Team America, and the red state governors would say, yep, we ain't gonna play your game anymore. We're doing something different. The people would buy in because the people are fed up. Most of the people are fed up. And if there were some political figures that had the man and lady cojones that was necessary to stand up and do what needs to be done, the people will roll with you. Okay. And then then we got here, it says that he has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislature. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation. Anybody remember when Obama once said that we need a civilian force just as strong and well-funded as our military? What ideology is going to dominate, folks? I said this earlier. If the dominant ideology is not grounded at the foundation of reality, they're going to do whatever the hell they're told to do by those that they deem to be authoritative above them. And if there's not enough good people to ensure that that tyrannical leaders don't have people to carry out their will, then tyranny is going to rule the land. What happens if traditional America is forced out? What do you think? What do you think all of the moves that were made in the military with mandating the COVID shot and just totally changing the standards up in the military? What do you think the purpose of that was? A big part of why our military has been gutted is because they wanted to get rid of traditional patriotic minded Americans in the military, because they just want a bunch of ideologically compromised people there that don't give a damn about the Constitution, that don't give a damn about traditional America, who have been conditioned to see the majority of Americans as being the problem. And then those people will be directed to do things that we traditional patriotic minded Americans would recognize as unconstitutional, but they don't care. They don't know the Constitution. They don't care about the Constitution. They just do what they're told. People have got to get that through their thick heads. And then it says here, says he has King George was quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. Where am I at here? So back up a minute to where was I at here? He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution, right? So that's what I got listed here as 13. It says, being subjected to UN initiatives. Folks, they're trying to give the World Health Organization authority in the United States so that the feds will force the system's will on the people. So that the World Health Organization, which we've talked about, was established by a man named Brock Chisholm. He was a psychiatrist. The first head of the World Health Organization was a psychiatrist who was an atheist who believed in he believed that it was wrong to teach people moral absolutes, and he thought it was shameful to teach kids the Bible, right? He was one of those wild-eyed believers in nothing, right? He believed that everything came from nothing into nothingness and randomly aligned into a highly complex and measurable order, right? And he thought he was wise for that. And then I just got an email this last week from the Blaze Network, which is Glenn Beck's outfit, and the Federal Communications Commission is really, really working to take complete control of the internet, to make it where people like myself and others that are way more established in this, we can't even be heard. Like Glenn Beck is legitimately, you can hear the concern in his voice. He's very concerned that if the FCC is able to force this and take complete control over the internet, that his days will be numbered. I mean, it's a terrifying thought, folks. If they can, and there's people out there that'll say, well, just do something better, just compete better. Folks, they have stacked it in their favor so heavily, and they've done it with government subsidies. Okay. They have access to the reins of power so that everything is so weighted in their favor that nobody can afford to even compete with them. Okay. And if they shut down people's ability to communicate freely online, then they can get messages out to the masses faster than anybody can actually counter that. I don't understand how people struggle to grasp that concept, but there's a lot of people that just really they struggle to make sense of it all, and it's just crazy that so many people are so lulled into this state of complacency. I mean, what more motivation do you need, people, than to just actually look out here and recognize that the only thing separating us from chaos is electricity, really. Electricity and the supply chain. If something was to disrupt that, man, we're talking serious pandemonium. I mean, we are so close to chaos that it would be hard to sleep at night if it wasn't for my faith in the Lord and knowing that God has led me and guided and directed my family to have the skills and the resources that are necessary to survive if things got really bad. But there's a lot of people out there that don't have that, and those people will turn desperate if things get bad. And like I said, it doesn't have to be this way, but communities and churches have got to recognize what is, become aware, unify, and then act accordingly. Or when things get really nasty and people aren't prepared, you know how that's going to go. And so this part here about quartering large bodies of armed troops. Now, in that time, it was that they were making property owners house those large bodies of armed troops, right? And then the system was protecting them by mock trial from punishment for any bad things that they did to the American people. And so we're not doing that per se. Like, it's not like the government's like, you got to house all these people. But I mean, the system does house its enforcers, right? And I mean, I spoke with a federal agent one time. I asked him, I said, man, you pay attention to things that are going on in politics and watch the news and stuff? He said, no, not really. I said, for real? I said, man, I've been told that military people were told to just not watch the news. Don't try to figure out everything that's going on. You just do your job. I said, is that kind of like, how you approach it? He's like, I mean, yeah. He's like, man, I just do my job and then I just enjoy my life. And so what I've gathered from this, because I did a little bit of research and I found that these people, they are paid pretty good. That, I mean, that's pretty much their life. They're ideologically compromised. They don't recognize where the foundation of reality is. They have a job that makes them feel powerful to a degree, but they're largely ignorant to reality, and they're paid good. So it's, they're like so many other people. They don't know a whole lot outside of profession and the things they do for fun. And it says King George was cutting off their trade with all parts of the world. Let's see, where's it? And this isn't necessarily the same as cutting off our trade with all parts of the world. It's not like they've got us blockaded, but it does make me think about how we're not better partnered with South America and Mexico and Canada. And I know that there's a North America Union, but it doesn't seem like it flows real well. And people talk about, we need to be more environmentally friendly. And then, we get some pickles, and I hate that I shop at Walmart, but man, like, how do you not? Money is tight, and it's that way for a lot of people. So, man, we still shop at Walmart, and so anyway, we got some pickles, and it said product of India, and I was like, you got to be kidding me! How is it that it is more cost effective and environmentally friendly to have pickles shipped here from India than to just grow some daggone pickles, which I know it's cucumbers, to grow some cucumbers and make pickles right here in America? Okay. A lot of stuff just doesn't make sense. Okay. The function of our society would be so much better if people just recognize what is. If we recognize what is and we sought to address the needs that exist, much greater harmony. Okay. And it says, I'm gonna just read through the rest of these, and then I'll catch back up. For imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule in these colonies. Okay. And so we look at what we got going on here in the present. Our taxes keep increasing, but there's billions of dollars being sent overseas while our society rots. They've sent enough money to Ukraine since, I believe, 2015 that could have been $200 million to each of the 435 congressional districts in the United States. Look at Rand Paul's waste report. Okay, I got a statistic from fee.org. It said from 1968 to 1993, there were enough funds sent from the government to major U.S. cities that those funds could have been used to purchase all the assets of every Fortune 500 company and all the farmland in the United States. And look at our cities. Look at our cities. Okay. Let's see. 18. Which one was that? Depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury. I know I talk about Alex Jones a lot. The man is a American legend, and he's really he was defaulted for an aggressive, unpopular opinion. And I mean, then you look at the pervasive corruption and lies that we have in our society, and how people like the Clintons go without answering for what they've done. Look at was it Robert Mendez, the congressman from New Jersey? All the things that come out about how they had all kinds of bribes and funds that were given to them, and then it just kind of gets brushed under the rug. You look at the track record of our government, the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the things that with Ruby Ridge and Waco, and all of these different things that have happened to people where the government has been in the wrong, and then it just kind of gets swept under the rug. And then you look at and it's bigger than just in the United States, but you look at Julian Assange. They've basically ruined that man's life because he was a conduit for information that exposed a lot of the corruption that was going on at a global level. Okay. You look at how Ed Snowden has had to live in hiding for the last 15 years of his life, had to disappear to Russia because he was willing to be a whistleblower and tell the people what was really going on with our intelligence agencies and spying on the American people. Okay. Look at how the federal government forces its will on the states and uses lawfare to continuously apply legal pressure while tying up the state's resources. Okay. There's the federal government's almost on a daily basis bringing lawsuits up against state governments on trivial issues just to tie up resources, right? And then let's see, it says here that King George was taking away charters and abolishing the most valuable laws and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, was suspending our legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has renounced government here in the colonies by declaring us out of his protection while also waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with the circumstances of deceit and untrustworthiness scarcely paralleled in the most savagely cruel ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilization. Folks, our charter is liberty. It's freedom. But we've been largely foundered in abundance, and we've taken it for granted. Most people have been made into slaves, and they don't even realize it. There's so many laws in place that everybody is guilty of breaking one of them. The federal government, it dominates the states as much as the states allow, and people just keep going along to get along because we still have some creature comforts. We've been purposely made soft. We've been purposely dumbed down. And because we've allowed this to happen to us, the people at the highest levels of this beast system, they despise us. They think that we're weak, and in a lot of ways, they're right. They think that we're dumb. In a lot of ways, they're right. But folks, we're just people. We just want to have a good life. We just want to have some nice things. We want to have enjoyable leisure time. We want to raise families, and we want to do things that matter. And we can do that. But we're going to have to hit a point where we make some difficult decisions. We're going to have to choose to really think about what future we want to see manifest. Because if we're not aware, if we're just going to go along to get along, I see the track record of these people. I hear the words that they speak. They call the everyday person a useless eater. They say that the average person is not essential. They say the average person is a hackable animal. That's what Yuval Noah Harari said in a speech at I believe the World Economic Forum this past summer, they say that free will is over, that we don't have the ability to freely choose. They think they can use the avenues of entertainment and our technology to manipulate us and make us do the things they want us to do. And I'm telling you, the only way out of this is to seek God and right standing with God's standard. And then we turn, and while we're doing that, we turn our attention to how can we meet the basic needs of our community. And we have to have other people on board. It'd be very, very difficult to do this with just a small group of people. But you know what? Small groups of 12 that are committed can influence a second group of 12 and a third group of 12. And hey, you know, it may not start out as just 12. It may start out as 3. And then that 3 may link to 9. And then you add 3 more and bam, you got 12, right? And if you're coming together and you're hanging out with other people, whether it's at church, whether it's good old boys drinking club, which you need to stop doing that because it's just not good for you. You want to understand why you feel so lethargic and why you got so much hanging over your belt line. It's because those are empty calories, right? Drink water, work out with each other, start challenging each other to get fit, hang out with each other. That's fine, okay, but let's limit the empty calories and let's maximize the discussions about things that matter. Let's talk about, hey man, what could we do to make it where we make sure that we're able to meet the basic needs of the people that we care about the most? How would we address this situation or that situation? Because folks, there's too many people out here that have a lot of credibility that have been sounding the alarm for a long time. Too many for you to just ignore. Too many to just ignore. And hey, this system's not going to quit trying to enforce its will on the people, okay? The federal government is going to continue to override state authority whenever it can. They're going to continuously apply pressure on state authorities who do not comply. And they've let it be known. The Biden administration has said that the greatest threat to their administration, they say to this country, but basically their biggest roadblock, white Christian nationalists, folks. And you know what? You can be a black man or a black woman or an Asian man or an Asian woman or a Hispanic man or Hispanic woman and still be a white Christian nationalist, right? Because it's not really about the skin color. It's about that purity that Christ gives each and every one of us who aim to abide by God's standard. That's what they mean by white. Okay. And that is their Achilles heel, is Christians standing up and taking a hold of that charter of liberty. And like I said earlier, the man Mark Houck, the head of the pro-life union of Greater Philly, look what they did to him, right? How is this system not plundering the people's taxes with inflation and fines and fees while using the people's resources to wage social war against us? Okay. The government literally borrows money from the banks who charge interest on the money the Federal Reserve creates out of thin air. Think about that. The system has used social engineering, and they do this with pop culture influences. Okay, what are you listening to for music? What are you watching on TV? And then the alcohol and the drugs. And when I say drugs, I'm talking about nicotine. And hey, I was guilty. I chewed tobacco for 20 years. God delivered me from that in August of 2020, and I've never looked back. I have zero desire. Quit cold turkey tobacco. God delivered me from it. I have zero desire from nicotine. You want to talk about a new level of freedom? The freedom that I have where I don't have to worry about, man, I'm about out of chew, right? Oh, I got to go get me a can so that I can have one first thing in the morning. Nah. I saw the day at the convenience store. It's dang near $19 to get a pouch of Levi Garrett chewing tobacco. Blew my mind. But that's how in 3 years it went from like $10 a pouch almost to $20 a pouch. It's crazy, right? But the system uses all of that social engineering and the manipulative substances that we put into our mind and our body so that they can destroy harmony in families. They want to keep the people focused on just doggy paddling, keeping your head above water, the trivialities and the frivolous things that don't really matter. All the while, they're continuously planning on how can they dominate the people, right? And then, talking about this part about transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries, what do you think is coming through our southern border? Okay. There's been 85,000 children lost. They don't even know. They had them, they came in, they've tracked them, then they lost sight of them. Where do you think those kids are going? I mean, let's say those kids are age, let's say they're 5, right? 10 years. Say those kids are ages 5 to 15. In 10 years, those kids are going to be ages 15 to 25. And what if they get 10 years of hardcore indoctrination, right? Once you get online sometime, look up how much government land is out there. So if the government, the people that had control over the resources to spy on the people, if they wanted to hide masses of people on federal government land out in the middle of nowhere, how many people would actually know about it? I don't think very many people would. I think it'd be pretty easy to hide people way, 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 way out in the millions of acres of federal land that they have. Okay. It's pretty scary. Okay. And then you look back at things like Operation Paperclip, where after World War II, they brought high level Nazis over to work in the US government. And then you think about the fact that a lot of those high level Nazis, they didn't answer for what they did. And a prime example is Joseph Mengele, the doctor of death, the dude that was primarily responsible for some of the most horrible and heinous things ever done to humanity. Okay, the experiments that were done on the Jewish people and the mentally handicapped people and the gypsies and all the people that the Nazis determined to be undesirable. Joseph Mengele died in 1979 in Brazil. That was 4 years before I was born. That blows my mind, right? That he could live out his days, and I guess other than the way his own mind might have been tortured through all that, maybe not, but he didn't have to answer for it in this life, right? And then it says that King George has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. What do you think federal law enforcement is being used to do? Federal law enforcement is harassing the people like Mark Houck, while aiding foreign immigration. Okay. The system is turning American citizens on the American people. We have federal agents who are just doing their jobs, just like the Stasi did their jobs, just like those Nazi war criminals did their jobs. They were ideologically compromised. There's a documentary, I can't remember the name of it. It's on Netflix, and it lays out how so many of those Nazi war criminals, they were just everyday people that just got caught up in going with the flow, and they weren't necessarily forced, but the threat of being socially ostracized and kind of made fun of influenced them to just go ahead and do really nasty things to ordinary common people that happen to have a Jewish culture. We are not so far improved. Like technologically, yeah, sure, we've got some technological enhancements since way back in the day, but right here and right here, we ain't no better. In a lot of ways, we might be worse. Okay, and then let's see. Yeah, I mean, I've covered a lot of this stuff already that I had wrote down here for the 27th point, which was the part that accompanied. Oh no, okay, I hadn't read that part. Yeah, he has excited domestic insurrectionists amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Folks, this right here, this excited domestic insurrections, that's what the BLM and Antifa protests in the summer of 2020 were. That's what, excuse me, the Mike Brown riots were. Okay. The media pumped that up. Those people felt validated that the government was that they had people inside the government that were with them, and they incited them. And then they provoked what happened on January the 6th. And that's going to come out in more detail now that the footage has been released. But folks, I mean, there's so many people out here that are just so ignorant to reality. The fact that we have such a obvious double standard of justice in our country. And folks, there's only so much aware people can do until more people become aware. Okay, it takes a significant number of aware people to really shift the balance of energy in our country. But right now, there's just so many people that are caught up in the daily that they won't even take the time to look ahead. Okay, and we're gonna have to have more people that are willing to do more for the future and do less for the system, whatever that means to you. What does that mean to you? To do more for the future and to do less for the system? Because, like I said, it's eventually going to come to a head, folks. That is the plan. They say by 2030, you will own nothing and be happy. I don't see how that's possible. Okay. It says in the Bible, I just was reading about this today in the book of Revelation, it talks about drugging of the people. And I just thought, man, that really catches my attention. Hold on, let me grab this. It really caught my attention how in this Bible, how it talks about end time stuff. Where was that at? Yeah, here Revelation 9, and they did not repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. And then it talks about here, let's see, 9. Yeah, this is a David Jeremiah study Bible, and it says worship always dictates works. If people worship God, they will do good works. If they worship anything or anyone else, they will eventually do the works of the flesh. John describes 4 works of those who worship idols in the tribulation: murders, including all devaluation of human life; sorceries, which is drug use; sexual immorality, all sexual activity outside the bonds of marriage; and theft, dishonesty. And twice John tells us that rather than falling to their knees and crying out for God's mercy, the people in this vision, like Pharaoh after the plagues in Egypt, did not repent. And it says the word sorceries translates the Greek word pharmakon, from which we get our word pharmacy. Ancient drug-based occult practices such as astrology, witchcraft, and divination were gateways to demonic possession. The use of mind-altering substances, doubtless with the approval of the government, will be associated with false religions in the end times. Honesty and conscience will die without the sanctifying presence and restraining influence of the Holy Spirit in the end times, there will be no moral order to guide individual behavior. That's the only way I can make sense of how you will own nothing and be happy. And sometimes I think these people that are orchestrating all this from the highest levels of government, I think they're trying to play God and mirror end times events to make the people think that's what it is, so then they can pull the plug at it and say there is no God, or that God, the Bible is wrong or something at some point. But maybe this is what John saw when he wrote the book of Revelation. Maybe he saw all this playing out. Maybe they're not consciously trying to force end times from the Bible so that they can use it for their own purposes. Maybe this just is the plan. And I hold on to hope that the people will actually recognize what's going on and stand up and pursue a better and more harmonious future. But man, it sure seems like a lot of people are headstrong, in love with sin more than they love God. And so I'm gonna close this down and share some final thoughts. Like I just got this one more slide here, and then I'll wrap it up with my final thoughts. But it says, in every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress, which is a remedy, in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Folks, we really haven't done that yet. We really haven't effectively petitioned for a redress of grievances. We lack the unity to do that. Now, that's what they tried to do that on January 6th, but they just weren't standing on the foundation of reality. Okay. They weren't coming together in agreement at the foundation of reality to unify. They were coming together as just Americans, right? That's not enough in these times. Sometimes I wish that it was. I wish that, we could just come together with all of our differences as Americans and stand up and say, nope, we've had enough. We're not going to take it anymore. But folks, we've let it get too long in the tooth for that. We've let things get too bad. And hey, God's will is going to be done, right? But in these times, I'm telling you with certainty, God is not going to let the people correct the course of this nation until we turn back to God, until we collectively recognize the foundation of reality and pursue right standing with God's standard. The descent will continue. It is what it is. It is how God has ordained it to be. Folks, the vast majority of the political class does not care about the well-being of the people. They just care to appease the people and enrich themselves. You have to understand that. And they are being used by the system to do things that are against our best interests. And until more people recognize that, then we have people who are unaware. If you can't recognize that this government system and the corporations who in large part control the government system, that's what an oligarchy is, okay, is established, powerful people who have a lot of economic pull, who are basically controlling the government. And that's what we have in place right now. And until more people recognize that and become aware, then it's really hard to get people to understand the importance of doing something different. And so as long as people remain comfortable, they're just going to ride this train right off the tracks. Somebody's going to have to get a hold of some folks and shake them and wake them, right? I hope you don't have to break them, but if we don't shake them and wake them, reality will break them eventually. And broken people, man, it's you got a whole bunch of broken people, it's going to be pandemonium, and I don't want it to be that way. That's the thing is, man, we got all these comforts And this could be much more comfortable if the people would actually just endure a little bit of discomfort. I can't remember specifically what that Winston Churchill quote was, but basically, if you ain't gonna go after victory when it's within reach and it's at hand, you're too weak to get it whenever it's going to be difficult. And at a certain point, you're going to have to fight for it, because it's better to die fighting for it than just dying because you're a slave and they hate you and they despise you, right? Because that's what these people at the highest levels, that's really what they think about the common average person. It says here, nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured, which is pled with them by the ties of our common kindred, which is family culture, to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. So it's like, man, we've been talking to these people and telling them, like, look, we're family, right? And there's got, you understand what is right and wrong, and you see what's going on, and you recognize that the British government has been overstepping its limits, but you're going to have to like recognize this, or we can't be friends no more. And then it says, they too have been deaf to the voice of justice and consanguinity. So they ain't hearing it. The people said, man, this ain't right, and we don't like it, and we're family, but you are on the opposite side of this. You're on the wrong side of this issue. They wouldn't listen. The British loyalists, they wouldn't listen. So then the founding fathers, they said, hey, because you won't listen, we must therefore acquiesce, which is we have to reluctantly accept in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies at war, in peace, friends. So what they're saying is, because you won't hear, because you want to be tone deaf, you don't want to hear what we're saying, you don't want to see what's out there, you don't want to pick up what we're putting down. We unfortunately, out of necessity, we can't get along no more, right? So if we got peace times, then sure, we can be friends another time, but right now we are mother-loving enemies, because you want to be stubborn, you don't want to see what is, you want to just keep on doing what the hand that feeds you tells you to do, whenever you know good and daggone well this ain't right, what's going on. Now we ain't friends no more, right? And so then they say, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honors. Hey, folks, if red state governors, red state elected representatives at the federal and at the state level, if they would just take this spot right here, if they would just do the same thing, right? If they would just say, hey, look, we've been trying to do it the right way. We've been trying to follow the procedures, and I think they call it like decorum. I don't know. They got all these fancy terms and things that just basically delay progress. We've been trying to do it that way, but you guys are ideologically compromised. We're gonna do this America first thing. And we ain't playing your game no more. Federal agents have no jurisdiction to operate in our state. Those federal agents that live in our state, they can take a hiatus and we'll suspend like some of their bills and things like that, like their house payment, whatever. Like we'll work all that out. We won't let anybody come and foreclose on their home or repossess their vehicle. They're just going to take an extended like break, and we're going to see who's going to be loyal to America first and who wants to be aware. And then whoever doesn't want to be a part of that, then we'll work something else out, and you can go and operate in a Democrat communist state, right? But right now, I don't think all of the governors are probably fully aware, and I think a lot of them are probably kind of scared because it's not like this system has a track record of playing nice. Just ask the Kennedy brothers, just ask Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, anybody that's ever really rose up to rally the people, the populace that the people could really get behind. I mean, they shot Teddy Roosevelt too. He was too tough to die. They didn't hit him in the right spot. And they shot Reagan. They got Reagan to kind of back off of some things that he was trying to do. Maybe they try to do it to Trump. And I'm not saying that I'm on the Trump train neither. I like the sentiment that got Trump elected. That whole America first really resonated with a lot of people. And it still resonates with a lot of people. We want a government that's really looking out for the best interests of the people. And that federal one out of Washington, D.C., it doesn't have the best interests of the people in mind. I think it's pretty obvious. We laid that out here today. Okay. And so Americans, what more motivation do you need? Does the roof have to fall in before you fix the leak? Does the engine have to seize up before you investigate all those lights on the dashboard? Okay. I laid this out here for you. This is the leaks. Okay. This is all those lights on the dashboard blinking and flashing and trying to get your attention so that you'll actually say, whoa, pull back on them reins. Let's start talking about stuff that matters. Let's start going to the county Republicans meetings. Let's start going and being involved in the churches that are biblically sound. Okay, that are standing up for God's standard, the churches that didn't let themselves get caught up in all the COVID hysteria and force parishioners to wear masks and do stupid stuff and then and not own any of it and not say, yep, we were wrong there. Okay. It's gonna take a concerted effort, people. We got to have more men that are willing to step up and lead their family in a godly way. Okay, men, if you'll do that, if you'll stand up and you'll say, hey, fam, I've missed some things, but I'm going to aim to honor God, and we're going to start going to church, and we're going to read the Bible, and we're going to aim to make sense of existence. And hey, if you really want to do that, there's a book over there at truestreality.com that pairs real good with the Bible, right? And then all these podcasts that I've put out so far, it's all just a part of a process of a refined hillbilly making sense of existence. Okay. And on that dude cast so far, this is the 11th episode. We have proven the reality of God and supremacy of Jesus Christ to the point of making doubt unreasonable. Okay. We've invalidated reasonable doubt here, which that's as powerful a way of proving the reality of God and supremacy of Jesus Christ as has been done in modern times, because it makes sense to the average person, because I'm a hillbilly who God refined. Okay. The ignorance of God manifested through the mind of a man. We've also explained and evidenced the deliberate undereducation of Americans. We have evidenced a conspiracy to destroy the national and state sovereignty of the United States for the purpose of establishing a global government. And we have evidenced a current reality more tyrannical against the American people than what was in place in 1776. I'm going to click on this slide right here so you can just kind of pause it if you want to. These were all the people in alphabetical order that signed the Declaration of Independence. They pledged their lives and their fortunes. See that? They mutually pledged their lives and their fortunes and their sacred honor. Folks, what do we have for sacred honor? What are we pledging? What are we pledging to this? I'm as all in as a man can go all in. Okay. I left a career that I really liked, but I couldn't continue on in it because it was controlled by a bunch of ideologically compromised people, and it was not effective. I couldn't keep going along to get along, dedicating my life and my time and my energy trying to help kids, but being handicapped and handcuffed because we weren't allowed to be able to really teach the young people the truth. I was a high school history teacher. I wanted to be able to teach them more. I used the Socratic method a lot and asked a lot of leading questions to take them in a direction that I knew they needed to go, but I just couldn't go all the way. And so I left it for this, to help people to find the foundation of reality with the hope that enough people will come together to do what needs to be done. And we can establish a world-class Christian school in this community that can be a template and a model for the rest of the country. But until the people recognize the foundation of reality and pursue right standing with God's standard, America's descent will continue. It doesn't have to get so bad. It can be so much better, but we can't just sit on the sidelines and act like what is isn't. We have to do more. What is the Spirit of God putting on your heart to do in these times? Average life expectancy is only 657,000 hours. We have 1,440 minutes in a day. How many minutes are you investing into the bank of the future? Think about it. God bless.